All right, let's get into Friday feedback for the week. You can always email me, info@davidpakman.com. We'll feature Reddit posts, Spotify comments, Substack replies. You never know what might show up here. Here's a great question from I Am Anonymous. Anonymous. I Am Anonymous from Reddit. Would the Epstein files even be credible at this point? I don't get how we can even be confident that anything released would be true. What's stopping them from simply releasing forged or changed papers with whatever names they want on there or not on there? Yeah, my take on this, it's similar, but it's not quite as conspiratorial. Here's what I think is most likely to happen. I think eventually something that will be called the Epstein files is going to be released. And the people who want to cover up the full and robust contents of those files will say, here it is, you got it. And it really won't be the full files. I will be far more confident that we are getting the real files and the full files if they are leaked. But even the leak could be fake, right? Like if you're thinking ahead a little bit more and you're like, okay, we really need to cover up the full files. If we just come to the table and say, you know what, you guys are right, we're going to release them now, and we hold back a bunch of stuff, people are going to go, no, you're not releasing the full files. What if we orchestrate a leak? So even in that case, I do think, although for different reasons than this person is saying it, I do think that we need to approach anything that's released that is called the Epstein files with some amount of skepticism. All right, so much feedback continuing to pour in about my interview with Rahm Emanuel, and you all mostly did not like him, like at all. I don't know that there's been a guest as disliked as Rahm Emanuel recently. Mark W. posted on the subreddit, yeesh, Rahm. Emanuel came off as combative and deeply unlikable to me in this interview. He spent the whole time acting aggrieved as if he's not being listened to, when I felt like David gave him more space to blather than any other guest he'd typically have. Less of this, please. Yeah, you know, one of the things that, let me back up. I don't delude myself into thinking that my audience is a perfect representation of what's out there on the left. Like, I'll give you an example. I think my audience oversamples socialists relative to the proportion out there in the world. Like, as an example. So if you looked at the comments to my videos and you were like, wow, there's a lot of actual socialism here, I don't think that amount of socialism as a proportion is what's out there in the real world, like just as an example. But I do think that the reaction to people is often pretty mirroring of what's out there in the general population. And if you compare my audience's reaction to Rahm Emanuel and my audience's reaction to Congressman Maxwell Frost, who we had on Monday, you all really liked Maxwell Frost overall, the ones I heard from, of course, and really didn't like Rahm Emanuel. Now, the caveat to this is, as I think of myself, I've never written to a show after listening to an episode. I've never left a YouTube comment that I can remember. And my point is, the people that comment and write in are a self-selected sample. And so in that sense, they may not really represent what's out there in the real world. But from the people I heard from, you all did not like Rahm Emanuel. And you did like Maxwell Frost. All right, Burnt Toaster asks, are the midterms really the key? David keeps saying if Dems win the House in the 26 midterms, Trump's agenda is dead because the House controls the purse strings. However, David and others have also said multiple times that this administration defies court orders and ignores the laws and all norms. What's to say that even if the Dems do take back the House, why would the Trump administration suddenly follow the laws and norms? They've not cared about any of that before, and I don't see that changing if they lose the House. If anything, they'll accelerate their plans. Well, so here's a couple thoughts on this. One, everything is the key. What do we have in front of us right now? A couple of special elections and Proposition 50 in California, which, by the way, according to the polling, is plus 20 in the polling. It looks like it's absolutely crushing. Right now, that's the key because it's what we have in front of us. We will then transition into the midterms. At that point, the midterms will be the key because We can't take the White House back in November of 26. We can take the House back. We can take the Senate back. Hopefully, at least the House happens. Senate's looking dicey. And so that will be the key then. Whatever is before us that we can work on, that's what is key at any particular time. At some point, the 2032 election will be key, but it's not key right now because we can't do much about it at this point in time. On this issue of doesn't the Trump administration just ignore everything anyway? There's a difference between a court order about a plane needing to turn around as compared to if Democrats take the House, they're just not going to fund Trump's insanity. There's nothing to ignore in that sense. And so quite literally, the bills won't pass, the projects won't get funded. And so it is key. It is very, very much key. All right, Dave CC wrote in about my interview with Nathan Taylor from the Election Truth Alliance, whose perspective is that it's conceivable that Kamala Harris is actually the rightful winner of the 2024 election. Here's what Dave said. Nathan Taylor, election rigging conspiracy. I think it's bullshit. Dave writes, sorry, but I don't buy it. All of the time before the election polls were showing Trump slightly ahead. Harris slightly ahead or tied in swing states, but all within margin of error. If Harris was ahead by 10 or so in the swing state polls, I might start to think something dodgy was going on. Even David was saying things don't look good in the run up to the election. That's true, I was. Polls also were showing Latino, young men, and Black support shifting to Trump in a big way. As the election drew closer, polls were breaking in Trump's direction even more as independents, undecided, started moving his way. Hillary had higher margins in the polls before the election, but still lost. When polls are that tight, Republicans usually win. Nothing out of the ordinary. I think the reasons for Harris's loss were the combination of the inflation spike, short campaign, sexism, and racism. Occam's razor. I do think that Republican voter suppression is a thing, though, and that has been getting worse over the years. Yeah, listen, my assessment at this moment in time from the Election Truth Alliance is that their allegations of irregularities may well exist in the data, but there is zero that they have presented or that I've been able to find in researching their claims that suggests that there was a theft or rigging of the election. The election ultimately reflected the polls. Hillary Clinton was polling better in swing states than Kamala Harris, and she lost in 2016. Joe Biden was polling better in 2020 in the swing states, and he won. Kamala Harris polled worse than both Biden, who won, and and Hillary, who lost, and the results reflected that. And so I am not convinced that what I can't, I'm not a math guy in that sense. I can't deny the statistical realities that Nathan Taylor identified. What I can tell you is that no serious evidence of rigging has been presented. That's where I'm at right now. All right, let's go to Spotify. Lucas And said, I loved the segment on Democratic messaging. To be honest with you, I'm afraid of burning bridges and the possibility of Dems becoming offended by this kind of calling out, especially with the midterms coming so soon. However, the politicians that are really going to make a difference and fight back against the conservative movement are not going to be swayed. If as a progressive community, we can hold these public servants accountable, then maybe there will be hope. But these days, I'm more cynical. Yeah, you know what's interesting? I did that segment last week saying a bunch of the Democrats I've interviewed, they are failing. This is no good. I got overwhelmingly positive feedback from staffers to Democratic elected officials. I haven't heard from any Democratic elected officials on that. We had Maxwell Frost on the show on Monday. He didn't mention it. Not that I expect that he would know exactly what I said, but it's incredible how much that segment I did calling out what's happening in the Democratic Party resonated, not only with my audience, obviously, but even with Democratic staffers. So that's very interesting. Stephen from Spotify on that same segment says, your segment about Democrats' messaging, where it falls short, and the rare moments when they connect is one of the most important segments I've heard in a long time. Stephen says, keep beating that drum. Well, I plan to, and it's funny, I'm sort of tentatively scheduled to go to some events in DC over the next couple of months. I'm kind of like, are they going to uninvite me? I kind of doubt it. I actually do think that the people in charge of these events agree with me for the most part, interestingly. All right. Eric Anderson on YouTube said, I'll only become a member. Oh, here we go. I'll only become a member if you make a video on Whitmer's kidnapping plot, showing that it was an FBI entrapment plot by our corrupt government and not a right-wing political attack. Truth matters. And when you lie about it, show your true colors. Well, listen, Eric, I don't believe that the kidnapping plot against Gretchen Whitmer, governor of Michigan, was FBI entrapment. So I wouldn't do a segment about something I don't believe. That's one of the rules I have for myself on this show is I only do segments where I say things I believe. And I know that many people on the internet have alleged that it was an FBI entrapment plot, but no such evidence has been presented to me. And thus I would not insult my audience in that way. And then finally, on the issue of membership, James says about joining, that's okay. I'll save my money. Instead of paying for constant, irrational, unreasonable rants about Trump and Republicans. Well, sir, you do you. I will say thank you to Rosemary Scott and Bert Weil, my newest two members. They have said, we're not going to be like James. We are going to sign up. And I really appreciate that. All right. info@davidpakman.com. Questions, comments, concerns, get them in. We've got a great bonus show for you today. You can sign up at joinpakman.com and get instant access to the bonus show.